Okay, so you guys have all done a thumbnail kind of prototype of what your landscape will look like. So whether you chose a bridge scape or a cityscape, this is my cityscape, you have an idea of where the shades and tints of your painted paper will go in a general sense. So I'm looking at this and I'm going to start by cutting out this shape from my shades, and I'm going to put it onto my watercolor paper. So you can choose to do your watercolor paper this way or this way. For this cityscape, I think I'm going to do it this way, okay? And so I will need the paper that I painted that is for the shade. And I'm going to, I can kind of measure, like just see how long the bottom is. If you want to do it this way and your paper is not as long, you can just cut out and match up the edges, like cut out some here and then cut out a little bit more here and match up the edges, make up the difference on the end. Either way, it doesn't matter. But this way I have enough where I can kind of measure how long it's going to be. So I'm going to do a little line, and I'm using pencil, so it's going to be kind of hard for you guys to see, so I might actually use Sharpie for this so you can kind of see, but I'm marking where the edge of my watercolor paper, this wash, ends. And then I'm going to just draw the shape. So I have this kind of landform here that kind of goes, it's bumpy, it looks like trees in the foreground. I'm just going to draw an estimated version of that. So knowing that it's this wide, I'm just going to draw my kind of did a drawing. I don't know if you can see that. And then I'm going to cut it out. And it doesn't matter which, you're not going to glue everything yet, you're going to lay it out first. So I'm starting with the shade, but if I glued the shade down, that would mean that I wouldn't have anything overlapping behind it. So I'm not going to glue it yet, I'm just cutting it out. Just going from front to back for this, and then I'll glue from back to front. Should have probably started doing this from back to front, but that's okay. And I'm just going to cut out the shape of my landform and just set it on there so I see what it looks like. Okay, and then I'll be like, oh, it's my foreground right there, okay? But I'm just going to set this aside. The next one that I'll do is the pure hue, okay? And the pure hue will go behind the shade. So my images that were in the pure hue were these two buildings right here. So not too much. So I'm just going to cut out two buildings. And I can sort of estimate this because they're just going behind here. So I'm going to do, remember, don't be afraid to go kind of big, because, so I don't know if you can see that because it's really dark, but I did two kind of rectangular building shapes. I'm going to cut them out. You'll draw them, cut them out. So there's one. Oops, and there's two. So then I'm going to play around with it and see. Okay, so I've got these two buildings that are to go behind, so I can move them around if I want to. They could be right in here. So see where I'm going with this, guys? So it's interesting, I'm noticing that my shade, which has black in it, is lighter than these, because these are the pure violet. So I may go over this and darken it up so it looks really dark. But I can do that later. You can do it whenever. Okay, so now I have my largest space, which is my tint. So the tint buildings are all of these in the back. So I'm going to draw these again. So, got a really tall one, goes up like this, come down. I'm just looking at what I already drew. They're not perfect, of course. I'm not really worrying about being. So I'm just gonna do that. Okay. Oh, I just realized it's gonna go off the page. So I really only have room for like this. That's fine. Actually, I might cut. I like this building, so I cut it here. Cut this one off a bit. I might have to trim it more. I forgot to measure. See? I made a mistake. And that's okay. I can just fix it by cutting a little more off. I'm cutting this away. Paper's a little thick, so now I have my kind of, let's see, that works. So I want this to go kind of lower because it's going to have to get covered by, you don't want to see it behind it, right? So I probably should have, and this is what I'm noticing now, I should have used this entire page and like use this last bit here, and that's okay. I could also add more of a landform, so let me show you. You can always use more of these pieces if you're realizing it's not fitting right without showing the end. Like, I don't want to show these ends like that. See what I mean? So if I need to cover that, look what I can do. You can do lots of things. You can add more buildings if you want. You have all this paper that you painted, so you can use it. So if you want to hide some of it, you can do something like this. Hide it there, and then have these buildings kind of come. So they're all in the same kind of but you can play around with it, so there. So just play around with it until you don't see how I'm not seeing any bottoms of anything. The building's not straight, and then you can trim the edges. So I would just trim these two off, right there and right there. And the last thing that I would put here is my moon. So just going to cut out a circle and I'll put it up there. Okay, so then what you'll do is you'll kind of do a little mark. Okay, like how high, because I want to glue the back ones first. So I'm going to make sure this stays where it is. I'm going to get my glue and I'm going to mark how low it goes on the paper so that I don't glue it down and have it be higher, because if it's higher, again, you'll be able to see the bottom and you don't want to see that. So I'm going to glue the back of this. I marked how low it's supposed to go. I'm going to glue it. I'm going to glue all the edges mostly. And I'm also going to kind of use my finger and spread it around a bit. Glue sticks will not work well for this. You will have to use a lot. I mean, you can try, but the best glue is the white glue. So I'm going to line it up with my 2 lines that I made. I'm going to press it down. This watercolor paper is really thick, so you'll need to press it down quite a few times. And I'll come back to it and keep pressing it as it starts drying. But I'm going to show you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to cover up that seam. So I'm going to put this one down next, because it touches almost the bottom. Just cover up that line, and that's going to take a bit to glue down, I think. You can see these are all popping up. Just keep going back and pressing them down. You don't want them to be popping up everywhere. You want to make sure it's pressed down. Then my buildings. So I'm gonna stagger them so that so I can see the other buildings behind them. So I'll do this. And then another trick is when this is dry, in order to get it flat, you can put a heavy book on top of it. So that's a good way to put this right here, press it down, because it's going to be curling a bit with all the heavy paper. I'm just assembling my space here. And see, I'm still pressing everything down. That's totally fine. Just be patient sometimes. Okay, and then I have my land, which I will probably make darker. That's going to be glued right in front of here. But this won't lay down, so we'll see if this lays down. And you can certainly put something, there we go. It's kind of working. It's kind of oozing out the back, but that's okay. You can use the rest of it and press it down. And of course the glue dries clear, so don't worry. And so you can see that I've assembled, still have to press it down. Oops, I forgot my moon. I've assembled my cityscape in layers, cut out your shapes, and you've got your landscape.